남았을 때 Chapter 5. Therefore, having been declared right by belief, we have peace with Yahuwah through our Adoni and Yah-ooh-sha Mashiach, through whom also we have access by belief into this favor in which we stand, and we exalt in the expectation of the esteem of Yahuwah. And not only this, but we also exalt in pressures, knowing that pressure works endurance, and endurance approvedness, and approvedness expectation, and expectation does not disappoint, because the love of Yahuwah has been poured out in our hearts by the Ruach HaKodesh, which was given to us. For when we were still weak, Mashiach in due time died for the wicked. For one shall hardly die for an obedient one, though possibly for a good one someone would even have the courage to die. But Yahuwah proves his own love for us, in that while we were still sinners, Mashiach died for us, much more than having now been declared right by his blood. We shall be delivered from wrath through him. For if being enemies we were restored to favor with Yahuwah through the death of his Son, much more, having been restored to favor, we shall be delivered by his life. And not only this, but we also exalt in Yahuwah through our Adoni Yah-ooh-sha Mashiach, through whom we have now received the restoration to favor. For this reason, even as through one man sin did enter into the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men, because all sinned. For until the Torah, sin was in the world, but sin is not reckoned when there is no Torah. But death reigned from Adam until Moshe, even over those who had not sinned according to the likeness of the transgression of Adam, who is a type of him who was to come. But the favorable gift is not like the trespass. For if by the one man's trespass many died, much more the favor of Yahuwah and the gift in favor of the one man, Yah-ooh-sha Mashiach, overflow to many. And the favorable gift is not as by one having sinned, for indeed the judgment was of one to condemnation, but the favorable gift is of many offenses to obedience. For if by the trespass of the one death did reign through the one, much more those who receive the overflowing favor and the gift of obedience shall reign in life through the one, Yah-ooh-sha Mashiach. So then as through one trespass there resulted condemnation to all men, so also through one obedient act there resulted obedient declaring of life to all men. For as through the disobedience of one man many were made sinners, so also through the obedience of the one many shall be made obedient. And the Torah came in beside, so that the trespass would increase. But where sin increased, favor increased still more, so that as sin did reign in death, even so favor might reign through obedience to everlasting life through Yah-ooh-sha Mashiach our Adoni. Chapter 6. What then shall we say? Shall we continue in sin to let favor increase? Let it not be. How shall we who died to sin still live in it? Or do you not know that as many of us as were immersed into Mashiach Yah-ooh-sha were immersed into his death? We were therefore buried with him through immersion into death, that as Mashiach was raised from the dead by the esteem of the Father, so also we should walk in newness of life. For if we have come to be grown together in the likeness of his death, we shall be also the resurrection, knowing this, that our old man was impaled with him, so that the body of sin might be rendered powerless, to serve sin no longer. For he who has died has been made right from sin. And if we died with Mashiach, we believe that we shall also live with him, knowing that Mashiach, having been raised from the dead, dies no more. Death no longer rules over him. For in that he died to sin once for all. But in that he lives to Yahuwah. So you also reckon yourselves to be dead indeed to sin, but alive to Yahuwah in Mashiach Yah-ooh-sha, our Adoni. Therefore do not let sin reign in your mortal body to obey it in its desires. Neither present your members as instruments of disobedience to sin, but present yourselves to Yahuwah as being alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of obedience to Yahuwah. For sin shall not rule over you, for you are not under the law, but under favor. What then? Shall we sin because we are not under Torah, but under favor? Let it not be. Do you not know that to whom you present yourselves servants for obedience, you are servants of the one whom you obey, whether of sin to death or of obedience to obedience? But thanks to Yahuwah that you are servants of sin, yet you obey from the heart that form of teaching to which you were entrusted. And having been set free from sin, you became servants of obedience. I speak as a man because of the weakness of your flesh. For even as you did present your members as servants of uncleanness and of lawlessness resulting in lawlessness, so now present your bodies as servants of obedience resulting in goodness, kodeshness. For when you were servants of sin, you were free from obedience. What fruit therefore were you having then, over which you are now ashamed? For the end thereof is death. But now, having been set free from sin, and having become servants of Yahuwah, you have your fruit resulting in kodeshness, and the end, everlasting life. For the wages of sin is death, but the favorable gift of Yahuwah is everlasting life in Mashiach Yah-ooh-sha, our Adonai. Or do you not know, brothers, for I speak to those knowing the Torah, that the Torah rules over a man as long as he lives? For the married Asha has been bound by Torah to the living husband, but if her husband dies, she is released from the Torah concerning her husband. So then while her husband lives, she shall be called an adulteress if she becomes another man's. But if her husband dies, she is free from that part of the Torah, so that she is not an adulteress, having become another man's. So my brothers, you are also put to death to the Torah through the body of Mashiach, for you to become another's, the one who was raised from the dead, that we should bear fruit to Yahuwah. For when we were in the flesh, the passions of sins through the Torah were working in our bodies to bear fruit to death. But now we have been released from the Torah, having died to what we were held by, so that we should serve in newness of rock, and not in oldness of letter. What then shall we say? Is the Torah sin? Let it not be. However, I did not know sin except through the Torah. For also the covetousness I knew not if the Torah had not said, Thou shalt not covet. But sin, having taken the occasion through the command, did work in me all sorts of covetousness. For apart from the Torah, sin is dead. And I was alive apart from the Torah once, but when the command came, the sin revived, and I died. And the command which was to result in life, this I found to result in death. For sin, having taken the occasion through the command, deceived me, and through it killed me. So that the Torah truly is Kodesh, and the command Kodesh, and obedient, and good. Therefore has that which is good become death to me? Let it not be, but the sin, that sin might be manifest, was working death in me through what is good, so that sin through the command might become an exceedingly great sinner. For we know that the Torah is rock-like, but I am fleshly, sold under sin. For what I work I know not, for what I wish I do not practice, but what I hate that I do. But if I do what I do not wish, I agree with the Torah that it is good. And now it is no longer that I that work it, but the sin dwelling in me. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwells no good. For to wish is present with me, but to work the good I do not find. For the good that I wish to do I do not do, but the evil I do not wish to do, this I practice. And if I do that which I do not wish, it is no longer I who work it, but the sin dwelling in me. I find therefore this law, that when I wish to do the good, that the evil is present with me. For I delight in the Torah of Yahuwah according to the inward man, but I see another law in my body, battling against the Torah of my mind, and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin which is in my body. Wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from this body of death? Thanks to Yahuwah, through Yah-ooh-sha, Mashiach, our Adonai. So then with the mind I myself truly serve the Torah of Yahuwah, but with the flesh the law of sin. Chapter 8. There is then now no condemnation to those who are in Mashiach Yah-ooh-sha, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Ruach. For the Torah of the Ruach of the life in Mashiach Yah-ooh-sha has set me free from the law of sin and of death. For the Torah being powerless in that it was weak over the flesh, Yahuwah, having his own Son in the likeness of flesh of sin, and concerning sin condemned the sin in the flesh, so that the obedience of the Torah should be completed in us who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Ruach. For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the matters of the flesh, but those who live according to the Ruach, the matters of the Ruach. For the mind of the flesh is death, but the mind of the Ruach is life and peace. Because the mind of the flesh is hatred towards Yahuwah, for it does not subject itself to the Torah of Yahuwah, neither indeed is it able. And those who are in the flesh are unable to please Yahuwah. But you are not in the flesh, but in the Ruach, if indeed the Ruach of Yahuwah dwells in you. And if anyone does not have the Ruach of Mashiach, this one is not his. And if Mashiach is in you, the body is truly dead on account of sin, but the Ruach is life on account of obedience. And if the Ruach of him who raised the Yah-ooh-sha from the dead dwells in you. He who raised Mashiach from the dead shall also give life to your mortal bodies through his Ruach dwelling in you. So then, brothers, we are not debtors to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you are going to die. But if by the Ruach you put to death the actions of the body, you shall live. For as many as are led by the Ruach of Yahuwah, these are sons of Yahuwah. For you did not receive the Ruach of bondage again to fear, but you received the Ruach of adoption by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. The Ruach himself bears witness with our Ruach that we are children of Yahuwah, and if children also heirs, truly heirs of Yahuwah, and co-heirs with Mashiach, if indeed we suffer with him, in order that we also be exalted together. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the esteem that is to be revealed in us. For the intense longing of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of Yahuwah. For the creation was subjected to futility, not from choice, but because of him who subjected it in anticipation, that the creation itself also shall be delivered from the bondage to corruption into the esteemed freedom of the children of Yahuwah. For we know that all the creation groans together and suffers the pains of childbirth together until now. And not only so, but even we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Ruach, we ourselves also groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body. For in this expectation we were delivered, but expectation that is seen is not expectation. For when anyone sees, does he expect it? And if we expect what we do not see, we eagerly wait for it with endurance. And in the same way the Ruach does help in our weaknesses. For we do not know what we should pray, but the Ruach himself pleads our case for us with groanings unutterable. And he who searches the hearts knows that what the mind of the Ruach is, because he makes intercession for the Kodesh ones according to Yahuwah. And we know that all things work together for good of those who love Yahuwah, to those who are called according to his purpose. Because those whom he knew beforehand, he also established beforehand to be conformed to the likeness of his Son, for him to be the firstborn among many brothers. And whom he established beforehand, these he also called. And whom he called, these he also declared right. And whom he declared right, these he also esteemed. What then shall we say to this? If Yahuwah is for us, who is against us? Truly he who did not spare his own Son, but delivered him up on behalf of us all, how shall he not along with him freely give us all else? Who shall bring any case against Yahuwah's chosen ones? It is Yahuwah who is declaring right. Who is he who is condemning? It is Mashiach who died, and furthermore is also raised up, who is also at the right hand of Yahuwah, who also makes intercession for us. Who shall separate us from the love of the Mashiach? Shall pressure or distress, or persecution, or scarcity of food, or nakedness, or danger, or sword? As it has been written, for your sake we are killed all yom long. We are reckoned as sheep of slaughter. But in all this we are more than overcomers through him who loved us. For I am persuaded that neither death nor life, nor messengers, nor principalities, nor powers, neither the present nor the future, nor height nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of Yahuwah, which is in Mashiach Yah-ooh-sha, our Adonai. Chapter 9. I speak the truth in Mashiach, I do not lie, my conscience also bearing me witness in the Ruach HaKodesh, that I have sadness and continual grief in my heart. For I myself could have wished to be banished from Mashiach for the sake of my brothers, my relatives according to the flesh, who are Israelites, whose is the adoption and the esteem, and the covenants, and the giving of the Torah, and the worship, and the promises, whose are the fathers, and from whom is the Mashiach according to the flesh, who is over all, Yahuwah blessed forever. Amen. However, it is not as though the word of Yahuwah has failed, for they are not all Yisrael who are of Yisrael, neither are they all children because they are the seed of Abraham, but in Yitzchak your seed shall be called. That is, those who are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of Yahuwah, but the children of the promise are reckoned as the seed. For this is the word of promise. At this time I shall come, and Sarah shall have a son. And not only so, but Rebekah, having conceived by one, our father Yitzchak. Yet before they were born or had done any good or evil, in order that the purpose of Yahuwah according to choice might stand, not of works but of him who calls, it was said to her, the greater shall serve the lesser. As it has been written, Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated. What then shall we say? Is there disobedience with Yahuwah? Let it not be, for he says to Musha, I shall favor whomever I favor, and I shall have compassion on whomever I have compassion. So then it is not of him who is wishing, not of him who is running, but of Yahuwah who shows favor. For the scripture says to Pharaoh, for this same purpose I have raised you up, to show my power in you, and that my name be declared in all the earths. So then he favors whom he wishes, and he hardens whom he wishes. Then you shall say to me, why does he still find fault? For who has resisted his counsel? But who are you, O man, to talk back to Yahuwah? Shall that which is formed say to him who formed it, why have you made me like this? Does not the potter have authority over the clay from the same lump to make one vessel for value and another not for value? And if Yahuwah, desiring to show wrath and to make his power known, with much patience tolerated the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, and that he might make known the riches of his esteem on vessels of compassion, which he had prepared beforehand for esteem, even whom he called, not only us of the Yahudim, but also of the Goyim. As he says in Yah-ooh-sha 2, I shall call them by my people who were not my people, and her beloved who was not beloved. And it shall be in the place where it was said to them, you are not my people, there they shall be called the sons of the living Yahuwah. And Yeshayahu cries out on behalf of Yisrael. Though the number of the children of Yisrael be as the sand of the sea, the remnant shall be delivered. For he is bringing a matter to an end, and is cutting it short in obedience, because Yahuwah shall cut short a matter on the earths. And as Yeshayahu said before, if Yahuwah Tzapawut had not left us a seed, we would have become like Sodom, and we would have been made like Amorah. What shall we say then? That Goyim not following after obedience have obtained obedience, even the obedience of belief, but Israel following after the Torah of obedience has not arrived at the Torah of obedience? Why? Because it was not of belief, but as by works of Torah. For they stumble at the stone of stumbling, as it has been written, see, I lay in Zion a stone of stumbling, and a rock that makes for falling, and everyone who is believing on him shall not be put to shame. Chapter 10. Truly, brothers, my heart's desire and prayer to Yahuwah for Yisrael is for deliverance. For I bear them witness that they have an ardor for Yahuwah, but not according to knowledge. For not knowing the obedience of Yahuwah and seeking to establish their own obedience, they did not subject themselves to the obedience of Yahuwah. For Mashiach is the goal of the Torah, to obedience to everyone who believes. For Musha writes about the obedience which is of the Torah. The man who does these shall live by them. But the obedience of belief speaks in this way. Do not say in your heart, who shall ascend into the Shamayim, that is to bring Mashiach down, or who shall descend into the abyss, that is to bring Mashiach up from the dead. But what does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of belief which we are proclaiming. That if you admit with your mouth Adonai Yah-ooh-sha, and believe in your heart that Yahuwah has raised him from the dead, you shall be delivered. For with the heart one believes to obedience, and one professes with the mouth, and so is delivered. Because the scripture says, whoever puts his trust in him shall not be put to shame. Because there is no distinction between Yahudi and Greek, for the same Adonai of all is rich to all those calling upon him. For everyone who calls on the name of Yahuwah shall be delivered. How then shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without one proclaiming? And how shall they proclaim if they are not sent? As it has been written, how pleasant are the feet of those who bring the Besorah of peace, who bring the Besorah of the good. However, not all obey the Besorah. For Yeshayahu says, Yahuwah, who has believed our report. So then belief comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of Yahuwah. But I ask, did not they hear? Yes, indeed. Their voice went out to all the Arabs, and their words to the ends of the world. But I ask, did Yisrael not know? First Musha says, I shall provoke you to jealousy by those who are not a nation. I shall enrage you by an unwise nation. And Yeshayahu boldly says, I was found by those not seeking me. I was made manifest to those not asking for me. And to Israel he says, All yom long I have stretched out my hands to a disobedient and dissenting people. Chapter 11. I say then, has Yahuwah rejected his people? Let it not be, for I also am a Yisraelite, of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. Yahuwah has not rejected his people whom he knew beforehand. Or do you not know what the scripture says of Eliyahu, how he pleased with Yahuwah against the Israel, saying, Yahuwah, they have killed your prophets and overthrown your altars, and I alone am left, and they seek my life. But what does the answer to Yahuwah say to him? I have left for myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to Baal. So therefore also, at this present time, a remnant according to the choice of favor has come to be. And if by favor it is no longer of works, otherwise favor is no longer favor. And if it is of works, it is no longer favor, otherwise work is no longer work. What then? Israel has not obtained what it seeks, but the chosen did obtain it, and the rest were hardened. As it has been written, Yahuwah has given them a ruach of deep sleep, eyes not to see and ears not to hear, to this yom. Daud also says, let their table become for a snare, and for a trap, and for a stumbling block, and a recompense to them. Let their eyes be darkened not to see, and bow down their back always. I say then, have they stumbled, that they should fall? Let it not be, but by their fall deliverance has come to the Goyim, to provoke them to jealousy. And if their fall is riches for the world, and their failure riches for the Goyim, how much more their completeness? For I speak to you, the Goyim, inasmuch as I am an emissary to the Goyim, I esteem my service, if somehow I might provoke to jealousy those who are my flesh and save some of them. For if their casting away is the restoration to favor of the world, what is their acceptance but life from the dead? Now if the first fruit is Kodesh, the lump is also. And if the wood is Kodesh, so are the branches. And if some of the branches were broken off, and you, being a wild olive tree, have been grafted in among them, and came to share the root and fatness of the olive tree, do not boast against the branches. And if you boast, remember, you do not carry the root, but the root carries you. You shall say then, the branches were broken off, that I might be grafted in. Good, by unbelief they were broken off, and you stand by belief. Do not be arrogant, but fear. For if Yahuwah did not spare the cultivated branches, he might not spare you either. See then the kindness and sharpness of Yahuwah on those who felt sharpness, but towards you kindness. If you continue in his kindness, otherwise you also shall be cut off. And they also, if they do not continue in unbelief, shall be grafted in. For Yahuwah is able to graft them in again. For if you were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by descent, and were grafted contrary to conventional descent into a good olive tree, how much more shall these who are the cultivated branches be grafted into their own olive tree? For I do not wish you to be ignorant of this secret, brothers, lest you should be wise in your own estimation, that hardening in part has come over Israel until the entirety of the Goyim has come in. And so all Israel shall be delivered, as it has been written, the deliverer shall come out of Zion, and he shall turn away wickedness from Jacob, and this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. Truly, as regards the Basura, they are enemies for your sake, but concerning the choice, they are beloved for the sake of the fathers. For the gifts and the calling of Yahuwah are not to be repented of. For as you also at one time disobeyed Yahuwah, but now have obtained compassion through their disobedience, so also these have now disobeyed, that through the compassion shown you, they also might obtain compassion. For Yahuwah has shut them all up to disobedience, in order to have compassion on all. O the depth of riches and wisdom and knowledge of Yahuwah, how unsearchable his judgments and untraceable his ways. For who has known the mind of Yahuwah, or who has become his counselor, or who first gave to him, and it shall be given back to him. Because of him and through him and to him are all, to whom be esteemed forever. Amen. Just want to see how many more. Chapter 12. I call upon you, therefore, brothers, through the compassion of Yahuwah, to present your bodies a living offering, Kodesh, while pleasing to Yahuwah, your reasonable worship. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you prove what is that good and well-pleasing and perfect desire of Yahuwah. For I say, through the favor which has been given to me, To everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he should think, but to think soberly, as Yahuwah has given to each a measure of belief. For as we have many members in one body, but all members do not have the same function, so we, the many, are one body in Mashiach, and members each one of one another. Now having different gifts according to the favor which was given to us, let us use them accordingly. If prophecy, according to the proportion of belief. If serving, in the serving. Or he who is teaching, in the teaching. Or he who encourages, in the encouragement. Or he who is sharing, in sincerity. He who is leading, in diligence. He who shows compassion, joyously. Let love be without hypocrisy. Shrink from what is wicked, cling to what is good. In brotherly love, tenderly loving towards one another, in appreciation giving preference to each other, not idle in duty, ardent in ruach, serving Adonai, rejoicing in the expectancy, enduring under pressure, continuing steadfastly in prayer, imparting to the needs of the Kodesh ones, pursuing kindness towards strangers. Bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not be proud in mind, but go along with the lowly. Do not be wise in your own estimation. Repay no one evil for evil. Respect what is right in the sight of all men. If possible, on your part, be at peace with all men. Beloved, do not revenge yourselves, but give place to the wrath. For it has been written, vengeance is mine, I shall repay, says Yahuwah. Instead, if your enemy hungers, feed him. If he thirsts, give him a drink. For in so doing, you shall heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Chapter 13. Let every being be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from Yahuwah, and the authorities that exist are appointed by Yahuwah. So he who opposes the authority withstands the institution of Yahuwah, and those who rebel shall bring judgment on themselves. For those ruling are an object of fear, not to good works, but to evil behavior. Do you wish to be not afraid of the authority? Do the good, and you shall have praise from it. For it is a servant of Yahuwah to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword in vain. For it is a servant of Yahuwah, a revenger, to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Therefore it is necessary to be subject, not only because of wrath, but also because of the conscience. For because of this you also pay taxes, for they are servants of Yahuwah, attending continually to these duties. Render therefore to all what is due to them, tax to whom tax is due, tal to whom tal, fear to whom fear, respect to whom respect. Owe no one anything except to love one another, for he who loves another has filled the Torah. For this you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear malicious witness, you shall not covet. And if there is any other command, is summed up in this word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no evil to a neighbor. Therefore love is completion of the Torah, and do this knowing the time, that it is already the hour for us to wake up from sleep. For now, our deliverance is nearer than when we did believe. The Laila is far advanced, the Yom has come near. So let us put off the works of darkness, and let us put on the armor of light. Let us walk becomingly, as in the Yom, not in wild parties and drunkenness, not in living together and indecencies, not in fighting and envy, but put on Adonai Yah-ooh-sha Mashiach, and make no provision for the lust of the flesh. Chapter 14. And receive him who is weak in the belief, not criticizing his thoughts. One indeed believes to eat all food, but he who is weak eats only vegetables. He that eats, let him not despise him who does not eat, and he that does not eat, let him not judge him who eats, for Yahuwah received him. Who are you that judges another servant? To his own Adonai he stands or falls, but he shall be made to stand, for Yahuwah is able to make him stand. One indeed judges one yom above another, another judges every yom alike. Let each one be completely persuaded in his own mind. He who minds the yom minds it to Yahuwah, and he who does not mind the yom, to Yahuwah he does not mind it. He who eats, eats to Yahuwah, for he gives Yahuwah thanks, and he who does not eat, to Yahuwah he does not eat, and gives Yahuwah thanks. For not one of us lives to himself, and not one dies to himself. For both, if we live to the Adonai, and if we die to the Adonai. Therefore, whether we live or die, we are Adonis. For to this Mashiach died, and rose and lived again, to rule over both the dead and the living. But why do you judge your brother? Or why do you despise your brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Mashiach. For it has been written, As I live, says Yahuwah, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall admit to Yahuwah. Each one of us, therefore, shall give account of himself to Yahuwah. Therefore let us not judge one another any longer, but rather judge this, not to put an obstacle or a stumbling block in our brother's way. I know and am persuaded in Adoni Yah-ooh-sha that none at all is common of itself, but to him who regards whatever to be common, to him it is common. And if your brother is grieved because of your food, you are no longer walking in love. Do not by your food ruin the one for whom Mashiach died. Do not then allow your good to be spoken of as evil. For the reign of Yahuwah is not eating and drinking, but obedience and peace and joy in the Ruach HaKodesh. For he who is serving Mashiach in these things is well-pleasing to Yahuwah and approved by men. So then let us pursue the things of peace and the things for building up one another. Do not destroy the work of Yahuwah for the sake of food. All indeed are clean, but evil to that man who eats so as to cause stumbling. It is good not to eat meat, or drink wine, nor to do whatever by which your brother stumbles. Do you have belief? Have it to yourself before Yahuwah. Blessed is he who does not condemn himself in what he approves. But he who doubts if he eats is condemned, because it is not of belief, and all that is not of belief is sin. Be one more. Nope, that's it. Thank you very much. I'm gonna change this. In King Yah-usha's name, God bless you all. Amen. Namaste.